Young Thug recently announced that a rapper named Nine Vicious was signed to his label YSL. Nine's mixtape, Studio Addict, first caught my attention a month or two before that because he had what I felt like was a fresh and exciting take on the 2010s Atlanta rap sound. Musically, you get a lot of Young Thug influence, but you also get some from some of Thug's other children, like the late Lil Keed, with a little bit of Future sprinkled in here or there. And he also uses a bunch of Kanye West samples, which makes you wonder what the world would be like if Kanye West wasn't abducted by aliens in 2018 to never be seen or heard from again. And also they took his phone and put it in one of those pouches that comedians make people put their phones in so that he couldn't post on social media anymore. Nine Vicious's music is grounded in the roots of the last 15 or so years of hip hop, which might make you wonder why the cover is a reference to Michael Jackson's Bad. Because on the surface, there really isn't a lot of Michael Jackson going on here, but it is a cool picture, I guess. Nine has recently been teasing his next project called Tumblr Music, and he posted the cover for it, which is a reference to Tupac's All Eyes on Me. What does that have to do with the title Tumblr Music? And just as a little bonus, he dropped an EP called Before TM, or Before Tumblr Music, where the cover is a reference to Prince's self-titled album. And I know what you're gonna ask me, does it sound like Prince? The answer is no. The proposed Tumblr Music album title and cover is the perfect example of empty nostalgia in music today. The cover is pulling from 90s hip-hop, while the title is referencing late 2000s and early 2010s internet culture. Maybe he's trying to say he's pulling from all these different worlds or something, but I'm not following so far. Now, it doesn't really feel fair for me to sit here and critique an album that I actually can't listen to yet, because maybe the music will marry, the lyrical, storytelling, hard-on-the-sleeve approach of someone like Tupac and 90s hip-hop, with blog era samples. Maybe he'll be rapping on Beach House and that's where the Tumblr comes in. Maybe he'll get a Lana Del Rey feature. It's hard to understand what these references to Michael Jackson, Prince, and Tupac really have to do with Nine Vicious, beyond the fact that those three people are just cool. And Nine Vicious is just gesturing towards them being like, hey, these guys are cool. I'm cool. But look, Nine Vicious is far from the first artist to try to harness the power of nostalgia in their work. And while nostalgia is not a new concept, it feels like more and more artists are using it today. And I want to take a deeper look at that phenomenon. When is nostalgia in art a tasteful choice? And when is it a cheap crutch used by artists to avoid having to actually say anything at all? Where is the line? And how do we know when to draw it? And overall, is nostalgia a net positive? Something that keeps us learning from the past and involving other generations in popular culture? Or is it a sign of society getting progressively emptier? Are we just out of ideas? We're gonna get into all that, but first, if you like videos on music like this, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. I post a video every week, and if you want to see it early, go to my Instagram, HADJI Gaviota, throw me a follow, join my broadcast channel. I post all my videos in that broadcast channel one day early for free. Also wanted to say thanks to everyone who's checked out my group Elmjack's latest song, A Bother. The response has been really awesome so far, and we've got new stuff coming really soon, so stay tuned. I'm gonna put the link to that video in the description. Let's get back to the video. It's not too difficult to understand why nostalgia has a gorilla grip on so many people, especially once they hit a certain age. I think YouTube has already hit a critical mass of videos about nostalgia, touching on different cultural topics, so I'm gonna try to keep this section short. I also think nostalgia is a feeling that a lot of people intuitively understand. The definition of nostalgia is a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy, personal associations. For many, this is commonly associated with childhood. There are more localized sources of nostalgia, like things that would only make you or a small group of people get those feelings, like your hallway in your elementary school or your mom's cooking. And then on a larger popular culture scale, there are things that a big chunk of people in every generation would relate to or recognize. For example, as a 90s baby, there's Game Boys, the first 151 Pokemon, Saturday morning cartoons. 2000s kids might be more attached to iCarly or their iPod Touch. Boomers are nostalgic for a time period when people in their 20s could afford to buy a house. Nostalgia is one of the most uniform emotions because the only requirement for you to feel it is to have lived long enough to remember an earlier time. A study of college students in 2006 showed that 79% of participants experience feelings of nostalgia at least once a week. And in 2006, people didn't have endless scroll feeds on their phones, blasting them with throwback content, or smart iPhone photo galleries that randomly prompt you with old photos. So I would make the hypothesis that people generally feel more nostalgic now on a day-to-day basis than they did in 2006. But that's just me. So we've got this really strong feeling that a lot of different people feel very frequently. And in today's hyper-capitalist society, that means somebody's gonna try to make money off that. We're gonna spend this video mostly focused on the music industry, but some of the most pertinent examples of nostalgia marketing are seen in other mediums. The movie industry is frequently criticized for pumping out remakes of the same IP all the time. And even when new blockbuster movies aren't remakes, they might be based off an old IP that people are vividly familiar with, like Barbie or the Super Mario Bros. Movie. TV is just as guilty, with gritty reboots of former family-friendly IP like The Fresh Prince or what Riverdale is to the Archie comics series. In video games, people are already nostalgic for the first few seasons of Fortnite, which came out in 2017. So they just released an actual permanent game mode called Fortnite OG where people can play the game just like it was back then, before you could be Godzilla in a pair of Air Jordan 1s hitting the gritty on your ops. Right now, Pokemon cards are the biggest rage, leading to fistfights between grown adults in the parking lot of your local Costco. And the resurgence of Pokemon cards was born out of nostalgia, especially during the pandemic when people were digging through their parents' basements or their attics, looking for Charizards that they could sell on eBay. Because people will pay a pretty penny for things that they had in their childhood. Fashion is in a permanent nostalgia cycle, with a few years ago baggy pants becoming cool again, only for skinny jeans to start being cool again now. The traditional time period that people often give fashion trends is 20 years, which means in 2025 we should be wearing 3XL big t-shirts and dressing like dem franchise boys. When we look at nostalgia in music, we're gonna explore it in a few different ways. In direct borrowing from the past, to genres becoming cool and not cool again, to personal nostalgia for artists themselves, to imagery and style. So let's dive in. In 2024, 2 of the top 10 hits of the year were straight up reworks of older songs. The second most popular song of 2024, according to Billboard, was Shaboozey's A Bar Song (Tipsy), close parentheses, which reworks the Jay-Quan song called Tipsy that came out in 2003, which is actually a number 2 Billboard hit on its own. Shaboozey reimagines multiple parts of the song, from the 1, here comes the 2 to the 3 to the 4 in the verses to, of course, the everybody in the club getting tipsy in the chorus. But here it's a full reimagining. You know, this song used to be like a snap, almost like proto ringtone rap song, and now it's a country song. So obviously it's undergone a bunch of changes on the way there. Jack Harlow's Lovin' on Me, the 5th biggest song of 2024, also reworks an older song, albeit one that was a lot more obscure, Whatever by Cadillac Dale. Still, even if people don't recognize the original sample like they might when they hear a bar song, the tone and style of the vocal recalls 90s dance music. Go back to 2023, and this effect is even more pronounced. The 5th most popular song of the year, Creepin' by Metro Boomin, The Weeknd, and 21 Savage, is a direct interpolation of Mario's I Don't Wanna Know. The 8th most popular, Fast Car by Luke Combs, is literally just a cover of the Tracy Chapman song. And inexplicably to me personally, the 10th most popular song of the year was I'm Good, (Blue, close parentheses. Sorry, I'm gonna stop doing that after this one, by David Guetta and BB Rexa? I've never had to say that name out loud. Which is a rework of the I'm Blue Da Ba Dee Da Ba Die Eiffel 65 song from the 90s. And I personally would also include the 2nd biggest song of the year, Flowers by Miley Cyrus, since it's interpreted by a lot of people to be a direct response to Bruno Mars' song When I Was Your Man. Just because the song uses pieces of something from the past doesn't automatically mean it's a cheap attempt at nostalgia bait. Sampling is one of the core tenets of one of my favorite genres, hip-hop, dating all the way back to the parties that DJ Kool Herc used to throw in 1520 Sedgwick Ave. At its core, at its most pure, sampling is about using what's within your reach to scrape together something new and inventive. It's transformative. Some of the greatest hip-hop songs of the 90s and 2000s were built out of sampling old soul songs that the guys who made those songs' parents were listening to in the house. The beauty of sampling has also been embraced by other genres. A personal favorite of mine is Camila Cabello's song, Boat. It takes the Pitbull song, Hotel Room Service, a 2010s era club banger that you'd hear at like your neighbor's kid's bar mitzvah, and reimagines it as background noise in a sad piano ballad. It's bizarre the first time you hear it, but to me at least, it sounds cool, like a drowned out party that you can hear in a distance while like you're hungover and trying to get over a breakup. The lead melody that was once so triumphant, like the dun 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 dun, it's there, but it's now reimagined as something sad. And it shows how the context you place something in can completely change it and transform it. And if you really do the science on it and recognize that Camila, like Pitbull, is also of Cuban descent and from Miami, and you can pick up on this cultural aspect, you know, that you might not have heard at first. And I think stuff like that is really sick. Now, with that being said, there comes a time when reimagining an older song is lazy. Take the DJ Khaled, Drake, and Lil Baby song Stayin' Alive from 2022. Did you even remember that song happened? This is not like an AstroTurf, this is a real thing. Say what you want about Drake, he's one of the greatest hook writers of his generation. Does he really need to rely on interpreting like an old classic Bee Gees song to write a good hook? I don't think so. And this is not a diss on interpolation. Like I said before, interpolation can be really cool. In fact, we can stay within Drake's discography to see an example of a good one. On 6 Man from his mixtape, If You're Reading This, It's Too Late, at the end of the song, he just randomly breaks into this like stripped back rendition of You Got Me by The Roots. It's just like Stayin' Alive in the sense that he's taking this old hook, this recognizable hook, and redoing it. But since it's hidden at the end of this album track, it doesn't feel as cynical. Especially given that the other song was a DJ Khaled collab with the hottest rapper at the time, Lil Baby, in a big music video. The interpolation on 6 Man feels like a monologue that comes after like an explosive scene in a play, and like you're not expecting it to happen, and then like the spotlight pulls up on the character and he's just like sitting there like, and if you were worried about that. Like that is cool, man. I think that's sick. The Staying Alive interpolation feels like it was created to sell you a CD bundle that also comes with a Funko Pop of DJ Khaled that has like a little Assad add-on. Drake has been doing more and more of this in his career recently, and we're gonna come back to him for another section. But another example is Way Too Sexy from Certified Lover Boy, which I feel like falls between 6 Man and Staying Alive. Because on paper it's just as lazy, and I know I shouldn't like it, but there's something like so ridiculous about Future doing the too sexy for this syrup, like that it's kind of hypnotizing and cool. Like I can almost defend, I don't know if I can say I can defend that one. I will accept it. It might actually be bad, but you know, sometimes it's okay to like bad things, you know? I do feel like an NPC for liking that song, but it is what it is. Another song that felt created in a lab with an interpolation in mind is Quavo and Lenny Kravitz's Fly song. You know what? It's not like so horrible like to listen to, but it does feel so focus grouped. Like it was made to play at the NBA Finals. Like that is an ESPN song. And that's kind of the drawback of like reimagining these old songs, right? It's like, what is the like quality for sitting down and listening to that by yourself? Like if you heard it outside, it's whatever, right? But who is like, I really need to hear Quavo redo Fly. 2022 may as well have been the year of the interpolation in hip hop, as one of the biggest rap songs of that year was Jack Harlow's First Class, a pop rap track featuring an interpolation of Fergie's song Glamorous. First Class is a polarizing example. Is it relying on the recognition of the glamorous sample? Yeah, but the way Jack like converses with the sample and changes the meaning of the spelled out word does feel kind of transformative to me. It's clever. Whether you're a fan of that song or not, I think that enough brain power went into creating that to make it like okay. And these are the bigger, more obvious examples of nostalgia in music. Like it's literally taking a piece of an old song and putting it into something new. But there's also a sense of nostalgia beyond just the song level. We can think a little bit bigger and look at the genre level. Much like how fashion trends work at a 20-year cycle, it feels like music does sometimes as well. During the pandemic, there was a pop-punk revival, led by artists like MGK and in some ways Olivia Rodrigo. MGK was inspired by the Blink-182 side, like the sunny, Californian dirtbag, young guy pop punk, and Olivia is getting her influence from artists like Paramore. And this shows like a revisionist history sometimes when we see these nostalgia trends, right? Because Blink-182 and Paramore were like almost a decade apart in terms of their peaks. But to a kid, they both just feel old, and they both have a lot of guitars. So you can kind of put them in the same box. It's like the way that, for me growing up, we listened to classic rock, but classic rock could have been anything that came out in like the 60s to like the 80s. And like to a kid born in 1995, that's classic rock. But like those artists were operating under totally different circumstances, you know? The Weeknd evolved from his personal brand of like drugged out dark R&B to retro 80s music as his career evolved. But he added a few new tricks to the bag at the end of the era. In 2023, he released the song Popular, which features a very Neptune's Pharrell bounce. And guess what? Exactly 20 years before that, the radio was dominated by Neptune's produced songs, like Snoop Dogg's Drop It Like It's Hot and Beautiful, or Justin Timberlake's Rock Your Body, Senorita. Popular only peaked at number 43, so it wasn't exactly a smash hit, but if you play as much Fortnite as I do, that song is inescapable. And plenty of other artists were trying to jump on that Pharrell wave around that time. I remember finding the song Dance by an artist named Jay Safari on TikTok in 2022, and that definitely qualifies as like Neptune's revival stuff. I don't think it's a coincidence that the Pharrell Lego movie came out about 20 years after that as well. And today it feels like the nostalgia cycle is starting to wash in some early to mid 2000s hip hop. Leangelo Ball, the former professional basketball player and brother of LaMelo and Lonzo Ball, has had one of the most surprising rap careers in 2025 after the viral success of his song Tweaker. The song had a really organic blow up, at least it seems that way, with people immediately associating it with like Nelly and those like sing-songy southern rap hooks from like the early to mid 2000s. There were memes all over the internet when that snippet first got posted. And it does really feel like something from that era, to his credit. It led to him signing a massive deal with Def Jam and releasing another single that also fits in that vibe. He just did a Rolling Loud performance that some people find polarizing, but I think it's safe to say that we're gonna see a lot more rappers trying to emulate that era of rap music very soon, whether it's coming from Jello or from somebody else. Meanwhile, some of the more forward-thinking artists are already trying to creep into the mid to late 2000s. Tommy Richmond started off 2025 with Actin' Up, a steel drum-led banger that some people mistook for sampling Soulja Boy's Crank That, and others who are slightly more well-versed in 2000s Southern rap music pegged it to Cadillac Don and J Money's Peanut Butter and Jelly. But the most likely truth is, I think they're just using a similar like stock steel drum preset because the melodies aren't actually the same. It's just a very distinctive sound in rap music. And part of the appeal to a song like Actin' Up to someone my age is that it reminds me of Crank That. It reminds me of that era of like ringtone rap music, which is one of the first eras of rap music that I was ever exploring by myself, you know, like beyond the CDs that my dad had or that my friends would give me. But also because Tommy's voice and his delivery feels so different from what artists were doing back then, it feels like something new. Even further ahead in the trend cycle is an underground rapper named 13 Degrees, whose really good new mixtape, Click City Volume 2, is infusing that turn of the decade YMCMB sound with modern vocals to make something new and cool. I really like that project. But therein lies the challenge of making a genre of music that's soaked in nostalgia. For Jello and for Tommy Richmond, since they were some of the first people to bring those respective sounds back to a wide mainstream audience, don't kill me yet, let me finish, they're gonna be safe in the eyes of a lot of people. And then there are the auteurs, the guys who have been making that kind of music the entire time, no matter whether or not it was cool or not according to the nostalgia cycle. You know, Tisa Korean, for example, has been making like that snap ringtone music in like a super cool new way for like almost a decade at this point. No matter what happens in the trend cycle, a guy like that is stamped. There are plenty of southern rappers who never really stopped rapping on beats that sound like Jello's Tweaker. It doesn't sound that far off from something that NBA Youngboy or Bossman D-Lo would use. The difference is that Jello has that sing-songy flow that kind of takes you back to like the Nelly days. But after these guys, it starts to get a little bit tricky. If you enter too late in the cycle, you're gonna look like an idiot. It's like the Squid Game red light, green light game. One wrong move and you look like a trend hopper, a talentless opportunist. Because if your music isn't actually putting a new twist on that sound, then it just looks like you're out of ideas. The power of nostalgia is sometimes so intense that artists get caught up on it not on a song level, not on a genre level, but on a personal level, for their old self. Artists often brush up against some fans' desires for them to go back to the old them. Kanye in 2016, before we lost him to the aliens, Alien Sex, had a whole song and interlude thing called I Love Kanye, where he's like, I miss the old Kanye, like mocking the people who would say that. Jay-Z on to the Next One in 2009 said, you want my old buy my old album. Some artists though, they don't push back on it, they start to give in. Lil Uzi Vert first broke onto the scene in the mid-2010s with a high-octane melodic take on the SoundCloud rap genre, and they rode that to top 40 hits like Money Longer, EXO Tour Life, The Way Life Goes, New Paddock. And Uzi continued to innovate and bring in new sounds with the Jersey club bounce of I Just Wanna Rock. But a large cohort of their fans constantly begged them to go back to that 2016 sound. In 2022, they even gave in on social media and said they would do it. They frequently tease projects that are sequels to older projects like Love is Rage 3, before dropping an actual sequel, Eternal Take 2, in 2024, which at least to me doesn't really sound anything like the first Eternal Take. Even the deluxe of the first Eternal Take was called Lil Uzi Vert vs. the World 2, so it was also a sequel. The Uzi fanbase has created a meme out of the fact that Uzi fans are constantly asking for the old Uzi. It must be exhausting as an artist to constantly see messages like that. When Uzi sat down with Kai Cenat on Kai's stream around the time that EA2 came out, they talked about it from a slightly firmer perspective.
You saying like, why I just don't give them what they want? Well, it's not that I don't want to give them what they want, but that's not the way it worked because I got here by bringing a new sound. So that's why I always try again and try again. And you know, sometimes people might not be too like happy about the sound, especially my main supporters, but you get new people every day that love you. And you always still come back and feed your main supporters, but you gotta remember how you got here, being innovative.
Even artists who aren't necessarily having identity crises can still use nostalgia of self to sell some tickets and albums. Taylor Swift has been re-recording her old albums because she's not being given the opportunity to buy her masters back. And when she releases the Taylor's version of each album, she brings her fans back to the time when those eras were happening. And speaking of eras, her whole Eras tour is built around bringing fans back to those specific moments in Taylor's career. One sign of both the power of nostalgia and the fact that I personally am getting old, as I've already talked about, is that artists are doing anniversary tours and shows for albums that I grew up listening to. Anderson .Paak recently toured his 2016 album Malibu, Lupe Fiasco did a Food and Liquor tour, and Earl Sweatshirt and J. Cole both recently did 10-year anniversary shows for their albums Doris and 2014 Forest Hills Drive, respectively. Even though these artists are still releasing new material, they know they can bring a bunch of fans into a venue by reminding them why they fell in love with their art in the first place. We can even see glimpses of self-nostalgia in the Drake and Kendrick releases from the past year. I started listening to some of their releases last year, and low-key it kinda seemed like they were dissing each other. Maybe I can make a video about that later. I don't think anyone's covered that on YouTube yet. But seriously, Drake actually sampled himself on his most recent release, Some Sexy Songs for You. He sampled his old song The Real Her on Spider-Man Superman. I personally think it can be cool when artists sample themselves. And I think the sample here sounds good. But given what Drake has gone through in the past year, this project had big expectations placed on it on trying to remind everybody why they like Drake in the first place. So including a sample of the old Drake does feel a little bit cynical, especially when during the rollout for his last full album For All the Dogs, he made a whole punchline out of an old line where he said they missed the old Drake, girl don't tempt me, essentially rejecting the idea of going back to his past self. But that's just how nostalgia is. It's complicated. Kendrick, meanwhile, was also repurposing old parts of his career on GNX in a new way. The song Reincarnated takes an old Tupac song, as Kendrick wrestles over the beat with his place in life as a black musician and unpacks his desires and goals and looks into his soul. Not only is it a callback to a rap legend in general, trying to place him in that pantheon, but to earlier moments in Kendrick's career, given that at the end of his album To Pimp a Butterfly, he created a conversation between himself and Pac using pieces of old interviews. Drake's and Kendrick's uses of the past in their new work are completely different, but they both carry a lot of weight. It underscores the versatile allure of the past as a literary tool. People, both as the artist creating the work and the fans listening to it, are fascinated by the past. They're drawn to it like a magnet. And it raises the question, why? The past is easy to look back on with rose-tinted glasses because people only tend to remember what was good about it. When people think of 2003, they picture it as a year-long version of the Pharrell Frontin' music video. One long party where you had unlimited aura and digital cameras to take pictures of beautiful women, and for some reason you have a half pipe in your house. They don't think about the beginning of the Iraq War that happened in 2003. Things were simpler, people were realer, less fried. There was Springsteen, Nirvana. Actually, there wasn't Nirvana, but there were the Foo Fighters, and that's kind of similar, I guess. And there was no music on MTV, but whatever. Nostalgia is unavoidable, and all humans in all eras of time probably felt it at some level. Like, there were probably some ancient Romans who were nostalgic for having to walk to the river to get water after they built aqueducts. Sorry, I got in my history teacher bag real fast. But I think people feel it more in this era than usual because they're not excited about the present, and they're scared of the future. We live in a very uncertain time, with AI coming to threaten jobs and just drastically change the way that humans live and communicate. With governments across the globe moving to become more hostile and nationalistic. You can sit there and face that, or you can let that archive page on Twitter show you cool pics of Motorola Razrs and Pharrell, who somehow in 20 years still looks like he's the same age. This starts to hurt the quality of the art that we're getting in this period when everything feels like a reference to the past. Don't get it twisted though, I love some references and I think some of them are awesome. For example, this rapper I like named Los Kemet has a song called Barter 7 Dig Dat. See, I didn't do the parentheses thing. And it has a full music video with fun and clever references to Young Thug and his career. The song though doesn't sound like a Young Thug song, it's its own thing. The video is well done and clearly had a lot of effort put into it. He didn't just Photoshop himself onto the cover of Barter 6. There's always room for something like this in pop culture, to me. But there's an issue when you have a guy like Nine Vicious and your cover art is a bunch of references to old classic albums. You know, Osama Sun had this same issue with some of the earlier covers in his career. The big issue with that, it's not that there's something morally wrong with referencing these old covers. That's not the problem that I have. It's that in 20 years, let's say one of these guys becomes a legendary artist. How would someone make that reference to them? If all of your aesthetic references are borrowed from other people, how are you going to influence the next generation? How are you even going to be memorable? Young Thug himself is the perfect example of how to push the boundaries of cover art. From the red spotlight of Barter 6 to putting on the dress because he had the stick on Jeffrey, to grabbing the guitar for the Beautiful Thugger Girls cover. He was ridiculed at times for presenting these new ideas. I was there, I remember. Now everyone looks back on them like they were always accepted and they were always great, because that's what people do with the past. But there was a time when these images were divisive and attention grabbing, and they really felt like they were making a statement. We as a society need artists who aren't afraid to try something new. When they do pull from the past, it needs to be transformative and building upon a foundation of something that someone else left, rather than rebuilding it from memory. Think of the way that Playboi Carti uses the legendary Atlanta mixtape DJ on his new album Music. By dressing his album up like a 2010s Atlanta mixtape, he honors the legacy of those who came before him and influenced him. And while the music does have some callbacks and references to like Mixtape Wayne, he still sounds like Carti. And he pushes the boundaries of what's to be expected in mainstream hip-hop like he's done on the last 3 or 4 albums. And you can confirm that by watching Will Smith's life flash before his eyes as he hears Opium Baby for the first time. But for artists who don't have cult fan bases like Carti does, for them to push boundaries and create the future, they need an audience that's open to new ideas and doesn't just want to be fed retreads of past eras of nostalgia. I'm of the belief that it's easier to open yourself up to new ideas when you have a sense of wonderment and a generally positive outlook for the future. When people have a darker outlook on society and the world in general, they tend to retreat into things they're already familiar with for comfort. I know this is true for myself because when I went through a darker period in the last year or so, I spent a lot of time buying old magazines from my childhood, playing old video games. Some people rewatch the same TV show like 15 times out of comfort. You tend to start doing these things that you did when you were a kid and you still believed in humanity. At least that's what happens for me. Nostalgia is warm and fuzzy, and that becomes a lot more appealing when the world isn't. To me, nostalgia is not ruining music on its own. It's something that will always be a part of the human experience, and it has been for a long time. Even back in ancient Greece, the term nostos referred to the idea of a hero returning home after a journey. We will always have those things that feel like home that we want to return to. But if you get the sense that pop culture is overrun with nostalgia today, and you're asking yourself like, why is Billie Eilish dressed like Fred Durst? Then I don't think the answer is just that nostalgia is too powerful of a feeling on its own. If it feels extra present right now, that's because there's nothing else on stage to share the space with it. There's a void of new ideas and ways to tickle the brains of the masses, at least at a mainstream level, because that's not really true on the underground level. Your first instinct might be to say, maybe as humans, we're just out of ideas. We've pushed human expression to the final stages. We're cooked. Lord, take me, and whoever's reading this, we ready. Let AI come in and replace us for good, but I don't think that's the right way to see it either. My English teacher in high school used to always say that there were only 37 possible stories, which I always thought was a thing she came up with and I thought was really cool and smart of her until I Googled it and I realized that it comes from this old book about playwriting. Most stories are low-key the same plot. For example, a rescue or vengeance, just dressed up differently. The story of Dragon Ball is based on a 16th century Chinese story called The Monkey King or Sun Wukong. There are people on the internet who argue that Harry Potter and Star Wars are actually the same story. What separates them is the world that the creators built out for them, and the way that they pull you into it, with character development and setting description, and the context that the stories exist in. The same logic applies to music. You know, there's only so many chord progressions out there that tickle your ears. But a good artist can make things feel different or feel new, just by adding the right kind of secret sauce. The rise of McGee over the past year is a great example. While he wears his influences of Phil Collins and 80s rock and pop music on his sleeve, he's able to do musical alchemy to make it all sound fresh. For artists to get to that point, they have to reject the instant gratification of trying to go viral off trend hopping and really lock in on their crafts. But somehow, like LeBron, I'm smiling through it all. And I see that being something that more and more artists are gonna do in the future. I actually have a positive outlook on this. Labels are already having a hard time selling the viral artists that they signed during the TikTok boom. And fans are starting to get sick of being sold disposable music too. When there's a vacuum like that, artists who really care about this might have a chance to make a run. That's what I'm banking on. Nostalgia isn't your enemy, but it's not your cure either. It's a powerful feeling for both the artists who want to make things that are similar to the things that inspired them to make music in the first place, and for fans who want their comfort food. But a great artist will be able to avoid the pull of taking the easy way out, and can find a way to channel all that energy into something new and beautiful. So I'm ending this on a good note. Hopefully we see some more of that in the years to come. Let me know what you think about nostalgia and music today, what you want me to cover next. Peace.